This is Captain Robert Falcon Scott and his remaining crew members, spending his last moments alive in a tent, deep inside of Antarctica during a blizzard, only 11 miles away from the nearest supply depot, yet not able to reach it. To understand how we got here, let's travel back in time by a couple of months. In the early 20th century, the South Pole became the ultimate prize for the world's bravest explorers. Few would ever return, and those who did would carry scars that spoke of more than just the physical trials they endured. For Captain Robert Falcon Scott, the ultimate goal of the expedition to the South Pole became his last: to be the first to reach the South Pole. He set sail from England aboard the Terra Nova, knowing that he was competing not only with the harsh environment, but with another explorer, Roald Amundsen, a Norwegian who was also intent on claiming the pole the competition was on. However, Scott was motivated beyond just expressing competition. For him, it was a quest of fate, a quest that would ensure his spot in history. The stakes could not have been higher. His team, consisting of 65 men, would make the unforgiving trek to the continent, but only a small group would be chosen to push forward to the pole. These included Dr. Edward Wilson, an ardent natural historian, Lawrence Oates, a hard-bitten cavalry officer retired from action, Henry Bowers, a navigator, and Edgar Evans, a grim and resolute petty officer. Wilson was not only a scientist, but a man who cherished the beauty of the Antarctic wilderness. He spent ages drawing wildlife in icy weather, recording the animals that lived in one of the most stressful places on the planet. His detailed drawings of penguins, seals, and the stunning landscapes remains a valuable legacy of the expedition. His willingness to see beauty in a brutal, unforgiving environment proved to be inspirational to the team. Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian explorer, had set sail just before Scott. Amundsen had already conquered the Arctic, and now his eyes were set on the South Pole. Unlike Scott, Amundsen had studied the harsh landscape carefully. He relied heavily on sled dogs and focused his approach on efficiency, streamlining everything to give him the greatest chance of success. In contrast, Scott envisioned a much grander scheme. He brought along motorized sledges, ponies, and dogs, hopeful that the latest technology would give him the upper hand. However, as the expedition sank further into Antarctica, it was evident that Scott's approach was wrong. The sledges broke down, and the ponies struggled in the extreme cold. Despite these setbacks, Scott's resolve remained unshaken. He had a goal to reach, and nothing could stop him. Nobby, a hardy pony who, against all odds, managed to carry supplies farther than any of the other animals. He became a living emblem of endurance, and the team rallied around his presence. As a result of Nobby's endurance in the face of death, the crew held out hope. But even Nobby could not escape the harsh Antarctic conditions. When he finally gave in to the effects of the cold, it was an utter disaster for the crew, a wake-up call about how fleeting life was in this snowbound wilderness. The physical toll was staggering. Frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion ravaged their bodies. Edgar Evans, a member of the group, developed signs of very advanced physical weakness. His health deteriorated rapidly, likely due to injuries sustained in the early stages of the journey, and by February 17, 1912, he died. The death of Evans was a blow to the crew, and the loss cascaded in the form of a trend of individual disasters. Yet, despite these setbacks, Scott and his men pressed on, driven by the belief that they could still achieve their goal. But things were about to take a dark turn. As the group traveled closer and closer to the pole, one of the only things holding up their morale was the hope of being first and beating Amundsen, the Norwegian. But as they neared the pole, they noticed something in the distance. The Norwegian flag, waving in the bitter Antarctic wind. Amundsen beat them to the pole by more than a month. Scott's heart sank. He and his men had traveled thousands of miles, fought through blizzards, endured unthinkable hardships, only to arrive too late. The victory that they had dreamed of was not theirs to claim. In Scott's own words upon seeing the flag,
"Great God, this is an awful place, and terrible enough for us to have labored to it without the reward of priority."
The return journey was even more brutal than the march to the pole. Supplies were running out, and the men were becoming increasingly thin by day. Even at their most desperate times, Scott did his best to maintain morale. He recalled to them their successes and the scientific findings they had brought forth in the process. However, the cold, tiredness, hunger, and so on were unending. As morale plummeted, Lawrence Oates, suffering from severe frostbite and knowing he would only slow the group down, made a decision that would define the spirit of the expedition. In one of the most selfless acts in the history of exploration, Oates, knowing he would not survive, stepped outside their tent during a stop and said, "I am just going outside and maybe some time." He never returned. His act of sacrifice remains one of the most inspiring but sad moments in polar exploration, a testament to the selflessness and courage that defined the expedition. March 1912 marked the final chapter in the harrowing expedition of Captain Robert Falcon Scott and his team as they attempted to return from the South Pole. By this point, the frozen wastes of Antarctica had claimed the lives of Edgar Evans and Lawrence Oates, leaving Scott, Dr. Edward Wilson, and Henry Bertie Bowers to face their grim fate. Exhaustion gnawed at their bones, frostbite mutilated their extremities, and starvation sapped whatever strength remained. Each step was agony, yet they pressed forward, driven by duty, camaraderie, and the faint glimmer of hope that the supply depot, just 11 miles away, might yet save them. But right as they thought they might have a chance for survival, something horrible struck. A blizzard started, and the three men were forced to set up camp until it would go away. What they didn't know, however, was that this would mark their final hours alive. As the blizzard howled around their tattered tent, the three men huddled together, trapped by nature's ferocity. The storm raged with an almost sentient cruelty, burying the world outside in an endless expanse of white. It was not just the cold that seeped into their bones, but the crushing weight of inevitability. They were so close to salvation, just 11 miles, but the unrelenting storm ensured they would never reach it. Inside the cramped tent, they took refuge not only from the elements, but in each other's presence. Scott's diary captured these final days with a poignancy that transcended time. Though their bodies were failing, their spirits remained steadfast. Each man bore his suffering with gallantry, refusing to let despair consume the group. Scott wrote of their unyielding commitment to one another and their shared sense of obligation, not just to themselves, but to the ideals of exploration, duty, and honor. Dr. Wilson, a gifted naturalist and artist, used the remaining scraps of his strength to comfort the others. His quiet, reflective demeanor brought a sense of peace amid the chaos. He had always been the soul of the expedition, finding beauty in the desolation and inspiring the team to see beyond their hardships. Bowers, the youngest and perhaps the most indomitable of the group, remained resolute, his determination unshaken even as death loomed ever closer. His relentless optimism, Scott noted, was a light in the darkness. Scott himself, a naval officer bound by a deep sense of duty, took it upon himself to chronicle their final days. His diary became not only a record of their suffering, but a testament to their courage and humanity. He wrote with admiration for his companions, lauding their gallantry and the extraordinary strength of character they displayed in the face of unimaginable adversity. "We are showing that Englishmen can still die with a bold spirit," he penned, ensuring that their story would inspire generations to come. In those final hours, as supplies dwindled and the cold gnawed away the last vestiges of life, the three men found solace in one another. They shared memories, spoke of loved ones, and reflected on the journey that had brought them to this desolate place. There was no bitterness in their words, only a profound acceptance and a quiet pride in what they had accomplished. They had reached the South Pole, a feat that few could even dream of, though they had arrived only to find that Roald Amundsen's Norwegian team had beaten them by mere weeks. When Scott wrote his final diary entry, his hand was trembling, weakened by frostbite and malnourishment. "We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. For God's sake, look after our people." These words, etched in the biting cold of Antarctica, immortalized the unyielding spirit of Scott and his team. The three men perished in their tent, the storm entombing them in ice. Their bodies would not be discovered until 8 months later. A search party located Scott's tent, and inside it, they read the heartbreaking last words of the explorers. The legacy of Scott and his men lives on, not as a story of failure, but as a profound testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of dreams, no matter how far they may take us.